Whoopi Goldberg, one of the most well-known TV personalities in America, has gone silent. But it's not just a temporary break. After Karoline Leavitt's $800 million lawsuit against her started gaining traction, Whoopi did the unthinkable. She fled the country. The lawsuit, originally filed over some harsh words Whoopi had said about Karoline, has now become one of the biggest legal battles in the public eye. But what's really going on behind the scenes? Let's dive in. Karoline Leavitt wasn't someone who let anything slide. A young, sharp legal mind, she had made waves in the political world with her unwavering commitment to truth and justice. By the age of 27, she was already a familiar face in the media, known for her strong opinions and resilience. But when Whoopi Goldberg, a television icon and host of The View, made public comments that damaged Karoline's reputation, it pushed her to a breaking point. Whoopi, a beloved figure with decades of experience, made a remark on air that questioned Karoline's integrity and professionalism. And, in doing so, she ignited a firestorm. At first, Karoline thought about brushing it off. Whoopi was famous, and she was just starting to make her name in the public eye. Surely this would pass, right? But as the days passed, the comment didn't fade. In fact, it went viral. Whoopi's words were everywhere, and with every retweet and repost, Karoline's credibility was being called into question. She watched as people, many of whom barely knew her, began to rally behind Whoopi's words, believing them because of Whoopi's fame and status. It wasn't just the comments themselves. It was the public's reaction that stung the most. Karoline had worked too hard for too long to let someone tear down her reputation with a few careless words. Silence, Karoline realised, wouldn't solve anything. She wasn't going to let Whoopi's falsehoods define her. If anything, it was time for her to fight back in a way that would make people take notice. After all, Karoline had proven time and again that she wasn't someone who shied away from conflict. So she did the one thing that would force Whoopi to pay attention. She filed an $800 million lawsuit. The lawsuit wasn't just about the money. It was about holding someone accountable for damaging her career and reputation. Karoline wasn't looking for a fight, but when it came to her integrity, she wouldn't let anyone, no matter how famous, get away with making false accusations. As the legal process began to unfold faster than anyone anticipated, the stakes grew higher, and Karoline's next move would soon determine just how far she was willing to go to clear her name. Would Whoopi respond, or would she let Karoline's legal battle unfold without a word? As soon as Karoline Leavitt filed her lawsuit against Whoopi Goldberg, it quickly became a media sensation. The public, already familiar with Whoopi's iconic presence on The View, couldn't help but watch as the drama between the two women unfolded. Karoline's legal team dove headfirst into the case, working tirelessly to gather evidence that would prove the damage Whoopi's comments had done. It wasn't just about the words themselves, it was about the consequences. In a world where public perception can make or break a career, Karoline couldn't afford to let a false statement go unchecked, especially when it had the potential to tarnish everything she had worked for. Social media played a massive role in the case, amplifying the public's reaction. Karoline's supporters quickly mobilised, creating hashtags and posting their outrage at Whoopi's comments. They shared personal stories about how public figures should be held accountable for their words, and the more the media covered the story, the more it seemed to spiral. News outlets across the country picked up on the case, reporting on every new development. Some outlets painted Karoline as the underdog fighting for justice, while others raised eyebrows at the sheer scale of the lawsuit, questioning whether an $800 million claim was too extreme. The controversy kept people talking, and, with every new headline, Karoline's resolve only grew stronger. But the media attention wasn't all one-sided. Whoopi, at first, tried to brush off the situation as an overreaction. Her legal team issued vague statements, claiming that the comments were taken out of context. Whoopi herself refused to comment directly, instead opting to continue with her regular duties on The View. But the longer she stayed silent, the more the media began to scrutinize her response, or lack thereof. It wasn't long before cracks started to show in Whoopi's carefully crafted public image. Fans and critics alike began to question her reluctance to directly address the issue. Could she simply dismiss it? Or was there more to the story? Meanwhile, Karoline wasn't playing defense. She wasn't about to let this be a passive battle. If anything, she knew that staying in the public eye was key to keeping the pressure on Whoopi. She took to social media, posting statements and videos that clarified her position. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for accountability. Her followers, many of whom had already admired her for her work in politics and media, rallied behind her in droves. Hashtags like #Justice for Karoline and #Hold Whoopi Accountable began trending as her supporters amplified her message. In interviews, Karoline made sure to stay calm and collected, but there was a fire in her voice. She emphasized that this wasn't just about her. It was about setting a precedent. She spoke about how important it was for public figures to be responsible for their actions, especially when those actions had the potential to harm others. She framed her lawsuit not just as a personal fight, but as a stand for everyone who had ever been wronged by careless words in the public sphere. But Whoopi wasn't letting up either. While she stayed mostly silent on the lawsuit itself, she made it clear in her interviews that she didn't take kindly to what she saw as an attack on her reputation. Whoopi's fans came to her defense, arguing that her decades-long career as a respected talk show host and actress should grant her some leniency. The back and forth between Karoline's supporters and Whoopi's fans only intensified the media frenzy, with each side digging in their heels and refusing to back down. As the case progressed, Karoline continued to make strategic moves. She appeared on television, talking about her commitment to justice and the need to challenge the status quo. She even released a video, shared by millions, where she explained the legal process behind the lawsuit in simple terms, hoping to educate the public on the importance of holding individuals accountable for their actions. The more visible Karoline became, the more the media began to focus on Whoopi's lack of response, and it was becoming increasingly clear that Whoopi's silence was doing her no favours. The lawsuit had become bigger than just a legal battle. It had turned into a public spectacle. Karoline had transformed herself from an underdog into a figurehead for accountability, and every day her following grew stronger. Meanwhile, the pressure on Whoopi was mounting. The longer she avoided addressing the issue, the more it seemed like she was guilty of the very thing she had accused Karoline of, failing to take responsibility for her actions. Karoline knew that the next move in the case could determine everything. It wasn't just about winning the lawsuit anymore. It was about making sure that her fight would resonate beyond the courtroom. With the stakes at an all-time high, both women were preparing for the next phase of the battle. Who would crack first? Then, just when the case seemed to be gaining momentum and Karoline was on the cusp of victory, the unexpected happened. Whoopi Goldberg, once the towering figure on The View, vanished without a trace. News outlets started reporting that she had fled the country. At first, it seemed like a rumour, something too wild to be true. But as the days passed, the reports became more concrete. Whoopi had gone off the radar and her whereabouts were unknown. There was no official statement from her team, no public appearances, and no indication of when or if she would return. The timing of her disappearance couldn't have been more suspicious. It occurred just as the legal battle over Karoline's $800 million lawsuit was intensifying. The public's curiosity was piqued. Questions flooded social media, news channels, and online forums. Why had Whoopi left? Was she avoiding the lawsuit? Was she trying to escape the mounting pressure? Could she have known that the legal process was about to expose the truth behind her comments? As the media speculated, the pressure only grew. For Karoline, Whoopi's disappearance wasn't just shocking, it was a pivotal moment. To her, it felt like a clear sign that Whoopi was running from the consequences of her own actions. After all, if she had nothing to hide, why would she flee? The absence of Whoopi from the public eye only added fuel to the fire, raising even more suspicion about her intent. In a public statement, Karoline didn't mince words. "We all know what's happening here," she said with a calm but firm tone. "When you can't face the music, you run. But running doesn't solve the problem. It just makes it worse. I will continue to fight for the truth, no matter where she is." Karoline's supporters were quick to pick up on the sentiment. They took to social media, posting memes and hashtags like #Where is Whoopi and #accountability. Not escape. The idea that Whoopi had fled only seemed to reinforce Karoline's position that the accusations were valid and Whoopi was trying to avoid taking responsibility for her words. Behind the scenes, Karoline's legal team worked relentlessly to stay ahead of the situation. While Whoopi's disappearance dominated the headlines, they continued to press forward with the case. In fact, Karoline's legal team saw this as an opportunity. With Whoopi out of the country, there would be fewer distractions and more focus on the case itself. They could use the time to strengthen their arguments, gather more evidence, and prepare for the eventual court hearing, assuming Whoopi would ever return. Despite the uncertainty surrounding Whoopi's whereabouts, Karoline remained calm and methodical. She knew that the case was bigger than just a personal dispute. It was a fight for accountability, for standing up against harmful words, and for proving that public figures couldn't hide behind their fame or avoid the consequences of their actions. Whoopi's silence, paired with her sudden departure, seemed to confirm what Karoline had been saying all along. People in positions of power couldn't be allowed to speak recklessly without facing repercussions. The legal and public spectacle only intensified as time went on. News outlets speculated on Whoopi's motivations. Some suggested that she was being investigated by the authorities for tax evasion. Others wondered if she had fled because she feared a court ruling against her. Regardless of the truth, one thing was certain. The disappearance had cast a long shadow over the case, and Karoline wasn't going to let it slow her down. In the midst of all this drama, Karoline kept her eyes on the prize. She knew that the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but with every twist and turn, she became more resolute in her mission. Whoopi's disappearance may have been a shock to the world, but to Karoline, it was simply another reminder that standing up for what's right often meant enduring the most difficult battles. And this fight was far from over. With Whoopi Goldberg now mysteriously out of the country, the pressure fell squarely on her legal team. The absence of their high-profile client was a major blow to their defense strategy. The public's curiosity about Whoopi's disappearance had only intensified, and without their star spokesperson to control the narrative, her legal team struggled to keep the story in their favour. Each new development seemed to backfire. Every time they tried to downplay the situation or redirect the conversation, they found themselves further entrenched in controversy. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt's legal team was thriving. They had long been working behind the scenes to meticulously gather evidence, and now they were able to push forward with even greater momentum. The disappearance of Whoopi, while shocking, only strengthened their position. With Whoopi absent from the public eye, the media and the public were left to speculate, and that speculation was becoming increasingly favourable to Karoline's side. The public reaction was swift. Karoline's supporters, already galvanised by her courage and resilience, rallied even more fervently. The hashtag #Karoline Truth was trending, with people from all walks of life joining the conversation. The case was no longer just a legal battle. It had become a symbol of standing up against falsehoods and holding people accountable for the harm they caused. Karoline's determined stance resonated deeply with those who had long been frustrated with public figures who seemed to operate above the law. As the weeks passed, Karoline gained even more media attention. She had quickly become a figure of strength, not just for her legal expertise, but for her ability to stay poised under extreme pressure. Her followers admired how she continued to maintain focus on the bigger picture, despite the personal toll the lawsuit was taking on her. What started as a battle for her reputation had turned into a public spectacle, and Karoline was now seen as a symbol of justice. While Whoopi's absence stirred up confusion and suspicion, Karoline's presence only seemed to grow stronger. She became a rising star in her own right, admired not only for her legal skills, but for her unwavering determination. The media outlets that had once doubted her now sought her opinions and updates on the case. Her interviews were covered widely, and every word she said seemed to make headlines. It was clear that she was mastering the art of turning adversity into opportunity. The more the lawsuit progressed, the clearer it became that Whoopi's sudden departure wasn't going to be the escape she had hoped for. In fact, the media scrutiny was now squarely on Whoopi's actions, or lack thereof, and every day she remained absent from the conversation only added to the weight of the situation. Karoline knew that the longer Whoopi stayed out of the public eye, the more people would wonder why. Was it because she had something to hide? Was it a tactic to avoid facing the music in court? Either way, Karoline remained undeterred, knowing that she was closer than ever to securing the truth. Karoline's supporters began to rally behind her even more intensely. There were calls for justice, not just for Karoline's case, but for everyone who had been affected by harmful falsehoods. Social media was buzzing with hashtags calling for accountability and transparency in the media. Karoline's ability to keep the focus on the truth, despite the chaos surrounding her, was winning her even more admirers. She had become a figure of resilience, an individual who was unafraid to take on the giants of the entertainment world. The media spotlight shifted entirely onto Karoline, and now she was the one being sought after for interviews and appearances. The once underdog figure was now the centre of attention. In every public appearance, Karoline remained composed, sharp, and unyielding. Her message was simple. She wasn't going to let Whoopi's departure undermine her quest for justice. She was going to ensure that the truth came to light no matter what. The growing sense of inevitability surrounding the lawsuit made it clear to the public that Whoopi Goldberg's escape wasn't going to stop the wheels of justice from turning. Karoline's determination was an undeniable force, and as more time passed, it became evident that she was prepared to see this through to the very end. With every passing day, Karoline's legal case grew stronger, and Whoopi's absence only served to cement her role as the one true voice in the battle for accountability. As the lawsuit continued to gain momentum, Karoline Leavitt's legal team was relentless. They moved forward with unwavering determination, ensuring that Whoopi Goldberg couldn't hide from the consequences of her actions forever. Despite Whoopi's physical absence from the country, the legal proceedings marched on. The court filings, media reports, and public scrutiny only added weight to Karoline's case, and it was becoming increasingly clear that Whoopi could no longer evade the truth. Every piece of evidence that Karoline's legal team presented painted a clearer picture of Whoopi's involvement in the defamatory statements. The media had initially been divided, but as the facts began to surface, it was impossible to ignore the mounting evidence that Whoopi had been reckless with her words. Karoline's resolve was unshaken. This lawsuit wasn't just about defending her name. It was about sending a message that the media couldn't get away with destroying lives without facing consequences. Then came one of the most pivotal moments of the entire case. Karoline, who had already been making waves with her sharp legal mind, took to the press to deliver a statement that would change the course of the battle. She stood in front of the cameras, her voice steady but full of conviction, as she addressed the damage that had been done. She didn't just talk about the defamation she had suffered personally. She broadened the scope to talk about the broader implications for anyone in the public eye who might be targeted by false media narratives. Her words were a call to action, urging others to stand up for themselves and not let baseless attacks define them. In her statement, Karoline spoke with clarity about how media attacks, especially those fueled by misinformation, could shatter lives. She explained that it wasn't just a matter of public opinion, it was a matter of integrity and the right to protect one's reputation. She made it clear that false narratives like the ones Whoopi had spread were dangerous, and they needed to be stopped before more people were hurt. It wasn't just about defending herself, it was about protecting everyone who might find themselves in a similar situation. Her statement resonated with millions. Within hours, the video went viral, and her words reached an even wider audience. Social media exploded with support for Karoline, and the hashtag #CarolineTruth quickly trended across platforms. It wasn't just her legal expertise or her reputation that was winning people over. It was her unwavering commitment to truth and justice. The public saw in her someone who wasn't afraid to fight back, someone who was willing to risk everything to make sure the truth came out. Karoline wasn't just a victim in this case, she had become a symbol of resilience. The way she handled the legal battle despite the pressure made her a hero in the eyes of many. She had turned a smear campaign into an opportunity to shine a light on the broader issues of defamation and media accountability. It was clear to everyone watching that Karoline wasn't just defending herself, she was changing the conversation about how public figures were treated by the media. As the days went by, the pressure mounted on Whoopi Goldberg. Her silence, combined with her disappearance, made it increasingly difficult to maintain the narrative that she was innocent. The media was no longer buying the story she had tried to sell. Karoline's statement had struck a chord, and Whoopi's absence only seemed to strengthen the idea that she was guilty of running from the consequences of her actions. By this point, it was clear to the public that Karoline was winning. Whoopi had not only failed to defend herself, but had seemingly admitted to her guilt by fleeing the country. Karoline had managed to turn the tide of public opinion in her favour, and with every passing day, her case seemed stronger. The legal battle was far from over, but the public had made up their minds. Karoline was the victor in this war of words. As the lawsuit neared its conclusion, the momentum had firmly shifted in Karoline Leavitt's favour. Every twist and turn in the case had built up to this point, and Whoopi Goldberg's disappearance was now just a footnote in a much larger narrative. The courtroom drama, once filled with uncertainty, was now clearly leaning toward Karoline's victory. The public had rallied behind her, and the legal team knew that they had gathered more than enough evidence to make sure Whoopi couldn't escape the consequences of her actions. Without Whoopi's presence in court, her legal team found themselves on the defensive. They had hoped that her departure would stall the process, but it only intensified the scrutiny. Karoline's legal team seized the opportunity, systematically dismantling Whoopi's defense. Each document, every piece of evidence, and every argument made it clear that Whoopi had crossed a line by spreading harmful misinformation. The public didn't just see it as a personal vendetta. It was a case of holding a public figure accountable for reckless behaviour that impacted more than just Karoline. What had started as a lawsuit for defamation had grown into something bigger, a fight for justice. Karoline's courage in standing up for herself had inspired many, turning her into a symbol of resilience. She had proved that even in a world of celebrity feuds and media warfare, accountability still mattered. The case wasn't just about an $800 million lawsuit, it was about setting a precedent. It was a clear message that when public figures used their platforms to hurt others, they could no longer hide behind their fame or influence. The media, which had once been divided on the issue, now almost universally backed Karoline. She had not only become the face of justice, but also the champion of anyone who had ever been the target of a smear campaign. Her legal victory was now seen as a win for all those who faced public defamation without recourse. Karoline had become an unlikely hero, someone who had used her legal acumen, her strength, and her integrity to fight back against an unfair system. As the legal proceedings came to an end, Karoline's team was poised for a victory. It was clear that Whoopi's team couldn't mount an effective defence. The case had become a media spectacle, And while Karoline remained focused on the legal aspects, the attention she received from the public made it even more difficult for Whoopi to regain control of the narrative. The once powerful host of The View now seemed like a distant figure, eclipsed by Karoline's unwavering pursuit of justice. In the final days before the case would reach its conclusion, Karoline held firm. Her message remained consistent. Truth and accountability would prevail. She knew that the legal victory was inevitable, but she also knew that the true win had already been secured. The public had seen her fight, and they were on her side. Karoline wasn't just going to win in the court of law, she had already won in the court of public opinion. As the case drew to a close, the lawsuit's resolution was only a formality. The public's support was unwavering, and Karoline had become an emblem of strength and determination. The courtroom was no longer where the battle was won. Karoline had already secured her legacy as someone who stood up for what was right, no matter the cost. She had shown that even the most powerful media figures couldn't escape the consequences of their actions when the truth was on your side. As the dust settled from the whirlwind of legal battles, Karoline Leavitt had emerged not just victorious, but as a symbol of integrity and perseverance. The months of relentless legal wrangling and media attention had proven that she was more than capable of standing her ground. The lawsuit was never just about an $800 million sum. It was about setting a powerful precedent that no one, regardless of their fame or influence, should be immune from accountability. Karoline had taken a stand, and the results spoke for themselves. Whoopi Goldberg, despite her initial escape from the legal process, couldn't escape the broader implications of what had happened. Her attempt to dodge the legal system had only fueled the fire, leaving her reputation tarnished. The media, once enamoured with her, now looked at her with scrutiny, and the public began questioning the validity of her previous comments. In fleeing the country, Whoopi may have hoped to avoid facing the consequences, but her departure only made the story more compelling. In the court of public opinion, Karoline had already won. The most significant takeaway from this ordeal, however, was the power of truth. Karoline had fought not just for herself, but for all those who had ever faced unjust attacks. Her message was clear. Standing up for the truth was more important than any amount of money or media attention. She had shown that with determination, anyone could confront defamation and fight back. Her resilience became a beacon for others facing similar battles in a world increasingly dominated by misinformation. While the legal case may have concluded, Karoline's influence had only grown. She had established herself as someone who could not be pushed around, someone who would fight for what was right no matter the odds. And the public had taken notice. Her supporters, already loyal, were now more passionate than ever. They rallied behind her not just because of the lawsuit, but because they saw someone who embodied strength, honesty, and courage. As for Whoopi, only time would tell if she would ever return to face the music. The public was left wondering if she would ever take responsibility for her actions, or if she would attempt to fade into the background. Either way, Karoline Leavitt had already made her mark. Her legacy was no longer just about being a political figure or a media personality. It was about being a fighter for truth in a world where falsehoods could spread like wildfire. In the end, Karoline's message remained simple but powerful. No one, no matter how famous, could escape the consequences of their actions. The battle had been fought, and while it had been hard fought, the truth had prevailed. Karoline Leavitt wasn't just a name in the headlines anymore. She was a force to be reckoned with. And if this case had proven anything, it was that, when you stand firm in the face of adversity, the truth will always rise above the lies. For Karoline, this was just the beginning. She wasn't backing down. She was just getting started. As Karoline's journey unfolds, one thing is clear. Standing up for what's right can lead to incredible strength and unexpected victories. What do you think about Karoline's approach to holding public figures accountable? Do you believe Whoopi will ever return to face the consequences of her actions? Share your thoughts in the comments below, And don't forget to like and subscribe for more updates on this captivating story. What would you do if you were in Karoline's shoes? Would you fight back or would you let it go? Let's keep the conversation going.